All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. Nothing like a Friday afternoon meeting. So we all appreciate those who stuck around and joined us today for our Framework Harmonization Working Group. My name is Leah McGrath. I serve as the Executive Director of GovRAMP, and I'm joined today by the fabulous David Ressler. He is our Chief of Operations and CTO. And so, yes. We are looking forward to walking through a couple of things with all of you. But if this is your first time joining us, this is the time when we come together and we talk about how do we synthesize, harmonize all of those requirements that are out there to make things work better for our communities in public sector, and especially for those private sector folks as well, who are trying to often conform to multiple different requirements out there. And so this is our time to work together to see how do we make this work better. We will be recording today's session. So you'll receive a copy of the recording or a link to the recording following the call. You're also going to notice that you are muted. That's because of the number of participants, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. So please do feel free to engage, drop comments, drop questions into the chat, or use the Q&A. And there are times throughout the conversation where we may say too, just, hey, unmute and tell us what you're thinking. So let's go ahead and dig in. We have a couple of program updates, and then we're going to talk about, kind of pick up where we left off on the CMMC alignment discussion. And then since we last met, there have been also a few new rules published from the FedRAMP office that we're going to walk through, talk a little bit about what it means for us and where we go from here. Anything else to add, David?
No, let's do it.
All right. So just a couple of program updates. This is just a wonderful resource. If you haven't seen it, kudos to our team, who is phenomenal. And they really have been working hand in hand. This is intended for our participating governments or government agencies or entities out there who are saying, hey, how can I adopt GovRAMP into what I do, whether it's into your security requirements or into your procurement T's and C's. This is a great resource, whether you're already leveraging GovRAMP or thinking about how to leverage it more into your programs and into your risk management practices. So what this adoption binder really includes, it's kind of the best of the best. It's the compilation. It's going to help walk you through the process, the types of questions, the people to bring around the table, if you're a government entity who's looking at how to adopt GovRAMP or how to go farther. It also links in I'm going to point you to the appendices. There are some awesome resources there that are going to give you links to sample language, sample policies, sample clauses that you can use. And many of these come from our best practices resource for our procurement tool that was developed initially in collaboration as a task force, a joint task force with NASPO, and has really been iterated and continued to be improved upon with input from our procurement committee. So this is a great new resource, tries to kind of tie it all together for folks who may have interest. Thank you, Chandler. I saw you drop the link into the chat here. But hopefully this is helpful for you or colleagues that you know. And we also welcome feedback on this. If you're using this, if you're referring to it, always feel free to reach out. We want to hear what's been helpful, or if you have any ideas for us. It's also that time of year. Every year between June 1 and August 1, we open up for open nominations. So this is an opportunity for you to raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to participate in a committee. Our working group right now and our task forces are open to all of our members to be a part of. So really the nominations are mostly for those committees that you see here: Appeals Committee, Approvals Committee, Nominating, Procurement, Standards and Technical Committee. Here's what I'm going to advise you. You don't have to pick, just submit your nomination, because we have an awesome committee, a group from our nominating committee, who actually will sort through these and think about where we may have open spots, where we have needs, and just knowing that you've raised your hand and you have interest really is fantastic in helping us understand where you might be a good fit. So you do have to be a member. So make sure you've completed that if you haven't recently. But this is something that is open every year between June 1 and August 1. I will say every year since we've done this, this will be our 5th year with open nominations. We've always had more nominations than we have spots to fill. Don't be discouraged. Keep raising your hand. And it's like anything, the more you get engaged, hopefully the more you get out of it as well. So we invite you to participate. David, do you want to speak a little bit to this one?
Absolutely. So GovRAMP back in June announced the 3PO discount program for those organizations that have gone through GovRAMP's Progressing Snapshot and core programs. And we just wanted to let everyone know this program continues to grow. We're currently at 11, I believe, on the list, and I have 2 more that aren't listed yet that will soon be listed as well. So we're pretty excited about this. It's really a testament to the quality of that Progressing Snapshot and core programs, because as I like to refer to them as our training wheels program, people that come out of that program have received great training from our RampQuest advisory team partners in how to present evidence, how to work through the NIST control standpoint, and how to be assessed. Because of that work that service providers go through with that, it makes the assessment actually easier. And so the discount is being passed along from these 3 PAOs to you for a recognition of that work, because it's made their lives easier too.
Cool. That is so great. And a couple other updates as we are in the month of July now. Hopefully you saw this. This was a great roundup, I think, that we released earlier this year in the spring that really spoke to how about a dozen states are leveraging GovRAMP. We have that question often. You can follow our website where we have participating government links to many of our participating governments, but this is a nice roundup. A couple of things to bring to your attention would be one, with July 1, Nevada's new requirements did go live. And then also in the state of Arizona, some of those renewal requirements go live in July 1 as well. With that, Arizona is having, we are working with the state of Arizona to host a few vendor trainings, July 16th and July 30th. So if you have any questions or want to learn more, that's a great one to attend. One of the things that David and I were talking about as we were talking about just how excited we are to be working with so many different participating states, really leaning in, and locals across the country, is that that's just at the heart of what we do, right? We're trying to harmonize, we're trying to synthesize, bring standardization to our participating governments so that they can really benefit from the common accountability standards, and of course to the providers who are able to then kind of assess once and serve many, report once, right? And so we felt like this was a nice update to include, because framework harmonization for us is about working across state governments, local governments, as well as with some of those federal requirements out there. So this is a good transition, I think, David, to looking at furthering the conversation around CMMC alignment.
Absolutely. So you want to go ahead? Thank you, Leah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're totally good. We were going to do a quick recap. Actually, I think this was my assigned slide, so that's my fault, everyone.
Sorry.
So we were talking about, if you were with us in April, I do want to give a quick shout out to, we had, probably a dozen or a few dozen individuals join us in a CMMC subgroup meeting back in early April of this year. And then we brought a lot of those kind of findings and discussion items to all of you during our April work session. Here's a teaser. We are planning on getting that subgroup together again, and we're going to talk about that now. But just recapping where we left off in April was exploring how to align the GovRAMP requirements with CMMC, with the idea, the objective of finding a pathway to leverage GovRAMP assessments to achieve a CMMC as well. specifically looking at the equivalency or presumptive adequacy standards for levels 1 and 2. The next steps that we had identified was really around building a clear case and demonstrating how GovRAMP's requirements satisfy the intent of those equivalency standards. And last but not least, once we have our ducks in a row, really reaching out and engaging CyberAB and DoD to make that case. And so I wanted to turn it over to David, who's done quite a bit of research to talk about kind of where we're starting. And this is where we'd like some of your feedback.
Absolutely. And I want to point out also before I get started on this, with our task forces and our working groups, that's yet another way to be involved in GovRAMP. The group that assembled for that are some of the most top-notch folks that I've worked with that really had great insight into the CMMC program, pointed out things to each other and to us that we should be aware of, both as service providers, GovRAMP community members, etc. So if you haven't been part of that, but are in the CMMC community, I would invite you to attend the next session that we have. Just email Chandler. So with that, one of the things that we were looking at as we were doing the research for this session was looking at how the DoD on their CIO website had a slide deck that talked about the alignment to NIST. And as I was looking through the slide deck, there was a mention on there that, they're currently using the NIST 800-171 revision 2, but they're accepting revision 3 submittals as well. And as got to looking at that, doing the mapping, it certainly made sense that revision 3 was the place to really start if you have not already started your journey with CMMC. A few different reasons behind that. One, NIST withdrew the 171 revision 2 back in 2024. Additionally, the DoD, through that presentation that they did, has explicitly said, we're accepting revision 3. And to put their money where their mouth is on that, they actually went ahead and defined all the organizationally defined parameters for revision 3. So they are gearing up towards that. Finally, the other reason behind that, GSA has announced their CMMC-like requirements that are also built on the 171. So if you're servicing both the Department of Defense as well as the rest of the federal government under the executive branch, this would make it a use one, or do once, use many opportunity for you. And this is where we had the question back to the group of, what's your thoughts on this approach? The other thing that I'll mention is that the 171 revision 3 borrows heavily from the same text, the 853, that GovRAMP is based on. So with that comes a natural evolution into the fuller GovRAMP community as well. We would love your feedback on that. Please feel free to give us a shout here in the comments on the idea, and or drop us an email, leah@govramp.org or david@govramp.org. And with that, I'll show you what some of the sample mapping of that looks like. If you'd hit the next slide, Leah. So we've started the mapping between the 800-171 revision 3 and the 853. And the text lines up very well. For instance, the first control listed here on access control, they are exactly the same except for the contents of CUI in here, the controlled unclassified information. When you get down to things such as awareness and training on the revision 3, they actually took the NIST, the AT2 enhancement 2 and enhancement 3 controls and blended them together. That way, they have just one control listed on the 171, but it breaks out to 3 controls in the 53, but still have a more direct mapping associated with that. And I see a comment here from Chris. Let's see, conflict between GSA and CMMC. C exception is that it does not apply to COTS product. GSA has no such exception. how is GovRAMP addressing the Delta? And that's exactly why we bring these things to the working groups, Chris, is to get that recommendation from the different organizations. Then I also see a comment here from Vicky from NIST, by the way, if you're not familiar with Vicky. Also highlighting the recently released interim final rule, CMMC and 853R3. Thank you for that, Vicky. I had not seen that, so greatly appreciate all you do for us on that. So David has homework now. But with that, yeah, go ahead, Lee.
No, I was just going to say Tony made a similar comment around the recent interim rule that was released to update CMMC to Rev 3. And that was in the Q&A. So just wanted to point that out as well. I think, David, my take would be that we're headed in the right direction, mapping to Rev 3 and continuing down this path. But definitely want to hear if others have a different view there.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love about this role is getting the feedback directly from folks like Vicky at NIST on, hey, have you seen this part? And also comments like Chris is here. And that's, again, another reason to get involved in GovRAMP and stay involved. But with that, if you hit the next slide, Leah, talk about our next steps. And, spoiler alert's already out there.
Yeah.
We're going to have our subgroup meeting to refine and validate. Please provide your input for that. Log in and do that. Next would be socializing it with Cyber AB and the DoD as far as GovRAMP as a vehicle into CMMC as well. Taking that equivalency memo that exists out there between FedRAMP and CMMC and getting that expanded. And then take our recommendation to our Standards and Technical Committee for approval and our board for adoption.
That's right. So I did drop Chandler's email into the chat. If you would like to join our subgroup, we will be targeting the last week of July or the early in the first week of August for that subgroup. And then you can see the entire full workbook of David's wonderful overlay magic that he's been working on and the analysis there, as well as have a chance to really help refine kind of the narrative around this. So we welcome your attendance and participation. Any questions, anything else that you want to put on our radar related to CMMC and our alignment work there? All right. Please do reach out, as David said. We wanted to take some time as well to talk about the FedRAMP consolidated rules that were in June and are now in effect. I think the effective date was July 4th. Is that right, David? 2026, nothing like Independence Day, Freedom Day for everyone. So really, really looking forward to digging into some of this and some of the highlights. As we mentioned, we will be sharing the presentation as well as the slide deck with all of you. And there are some great links in here where we link directly to, and we're going to point you to that. If you have questions about FedRAMP's consolidated rules, go to their source of truth. Our goal in sharing this information with you is twofold. One, we view it as a good resource as we're thinking about how to kind of keep our community and membership up to date on what's happening out there. And two, to think about what does this mean for GovRAMP. So those are really kind of our what we'll be talking about is some updates and then the so what, right? As we call it, David, the so what does this mean for GovRAMP? And we'll be asking for some input and giving some updates to you. But David, do you just want to first speak to what are the consolidated rules? What are the big items?
Yeah, so if you've been following along with the evolution of FedRAMP 20X and also their balance improvement requirements, it's been kind of I think Pete used the term hodgepodge of RFCs, notifications, LinkedIn posts, etc., smoke signals, I don't know. But they finally pulled everything together into one single website and are now requiring folks to adopt what's in that website. The first thing that is really a standout is moving away from the traditional word-based documentation into machine readable and adjusting some of the terminology that we've all become accustomed to. Some
I'm
of that.
clapping to the we're going away from the Word document. So that was my applause.
Okay. But the other nice thing is the signaling that, hey, the rules are going to stay somewhat static through December 31st, 2028. I fully expect there to be some refinement of the rules as they're written. I've already seen some commentary regarding grammar items or expand on this section and the like. So I expect there to be evolution, but not monumental changes regarding those. But some of the terminology that's really going to be important for our community to understand is that FedRAMP is changing the word authorized and moving away from it, and instead saying certified. So for folks that are in the GovRAMP Fast Track program, when you go through your next FedRAMP assessment, you're not going to get a FedRAMP authorization, but rather a FedRAMP certification. GovRAMP, however, at this point is not intending to change those terms. FedRAMP's getting away from using the terminology system security plan and moving toward decision record. And then finally, another big one to get accustomed to is they're no longer referring to the 3PAOs as 3PAOs or third-party assessing organizations, but independent assessors. So you'll see this new terminology used throughout CR26 and without an Annie-Oakley decoder ring to figure out what those translations are, this is the first thing that you need to be aware of. The next thing to know is that they have changed away from the traditional low, moderate, high impact ratings into a new classification system. Class A is their new pilot or entry-level baseline. So it's kind of your ticket to take the ride, if you will. They're accepting alternate assessments in this pipeline. The legacy Rev 5 ready now translates into a Class A. GovRAMP certification at any level translates into a new Class A certification, which means if you have a GovRAMP validated status, you can now, or in August, apply for Class A certification for your product to be used within the federal space. Anything that was legacy LISAS or low impact will now be considered Class B. Moderate will be Class C, and high will be Class D. And then finally, at the end of this month, I believe it's July 28th, if I recall correctly, the ready is being retired and will transfer into a Class A certification, which means that legacy-wise, ready did not allow you to get an ATO, but now with a Class A level, you would be applicable for that, which is kind of interesting and exciting for a lot of folks. The other thing I wanted to point out are some very important dates to be aware of. Leah mentioned the July 4th date earlier, which is when the CR26 rules become available and early adoption also begins. Wanted to highlight the Class A pipeline. So those that have GovRAMP native that want to go into the federal pipeline, that is expected to open on August 3rd. On December 7th, the new vulnerability detection and response rules come into play, and we'll be talking about those in just a moment. And then on March 7th, if you haven't made your December 7th deadline, what's going to happen is if you're in the federal program, you'll be placed on a corrective action plan. And you'll have till March 7th to get off the corrective action program. And then finally, on June 11th, of 2027, there's the intent to retire revision 5 for Class B and C. There's a question out there on when Class D, which is the high impact, will come in, because currently they haven't even taken that through pilots yet. And I see a question.
This is a great question. There's actually a comment right now. Pete, this is a question posted in GitHub. that Pete responded to. And the question is Class A FedRAMP 20X? Does that mean GovRAMP authorized maps to FedRAMP 20X?
Yeah.
Class A is kind of neither 20X nor Rev 5. It's the expectation once you have that Class A certification is that you would be mapping into 20X if you go farther.
Yeah. But if you look at the consolidated rules, Brenton, the consolidated rule for Class A does appear in both their Class A and in their Rev 5, and then in the consolidated part.
Right.
So it could potentially be used as a vehicle into both.
Yes.
But that is definitely a question that's best answered by the FedRAMP PMO.
The question around GovRAMP authorized mapping to 20X, no, right? It's 20X is a different
It's a different
program.
animal.
Yeah, it's a different animal altogether. But I do, my hope would be that a lot of the work that you've done to get into any kind of authorized can translate. But that's something that we're going to be talking more about. Let's see.
And I see
Yes.
Colton's response there. Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Yes. Now, ultimately, I think the goal is within FedRAMP that everything will be moving towards 20X. It's just when do certain parts move? And this is why we called out the certain requirements and important dates here.
So we did want to take a moment to dig into, in particular, the vulnerability detection and response changes that we see from FedRAMP, and that really were escalated in terms of their effectiveness because of CIS's memo in June as well. And so we wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about these because we think here, especially, is where there's potential applicability with GovRAMP. But before we hop on, I see more comments, David. I want to make sure we're closing the loop here.
Absolutely. So Patrick's asked, so Class A is like core authorization to allow easier transition to full authorization under Class B, C, and D. But reciprocity is still not available for GovRAMP to FedRAMP, correct? So yes and no on that from our understanding. What Class A is yes, kind of like that core, but it with a agency authorization can translate up to the appropriate Class B, Class C, or Class D authorization when the agency signs on to the package as well, is our understanding. But we do view that as reciprocity from GovRAMP to FedRAMP because Class A allows an agency to actually legally start using that product through this program of Class A. And there's a lot of good commentary on the CR26 website under Class A of exactly how that's intended to be utilized, Patrick. So we're extremely excited about the recognition and that bi-directional flow now between the two organizations. Leah, what did I miss on that?
You nailed it. You nailed it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. I'm sure this conversation will continue, and especially when the August timeframe comes, I'll go back to when Class A, I keep doing that. When Class A, not Level A, but when Class A opens in August, we're going to keep learning more. Hopefully, as you learn more, keep us apprised to that so we can really help members that are coming through our program transition smoothly as well if the federal government is an area they're interested in serving. Okay, moving on to VDR. David, do you want to walk through some of the definitions of what's new? Let's start with what's new, and then we can talk about how might this impact us.
Yeah, so again, more terms to learn. The first one is the estimate of potential agency impact. Which has this cute acronym of potential agency impact in ratings or pain. When we were putting together this slide deck, I was really tempted to put in together that pain chart you see at the doctor's office with the little smiley faces. But there's 5 pain ratings in the FedRAMP 20X or FedRAMP consolidated rules. N1 being the most minimal, which means there's minimal effect on a client, meaning federal agency. Narrow, meaning, all right, it's a little bit wider. Disruptive, usually meaning down. Debilitating, definitely meaning down. And debilitating, the level 5 of multiple agencies are being debilitated by that. So that's the first thing we need to get accustomed to and learn as we all start learning more about vulnerability detection and response, or what they are referring to as VADR. I love that they have a sense of humor in how they name things. If you want to move to the next slide, Leah. The next thing is Internet Reachability Vulnerability, or IVR. Is this something that's internet facing from a vulnerability standpoint, or is it something that's in an enclave network or in the back office or something, somewhere else that is not just directly accessible from the internet? These terms will come into play in the next slide. I promise you we're leading up to something really good. The next term, likely exploitable vulnerability. So how likely is it to be exploited? Is it very unlikely or very highly likely? This one is one that I think in the mythos era that we're all living in now, and the AI, the other AI tools that are coming out, is one that's going to be, everything's going to be likely because everything's going to be discoverable over time through AI agents. So this one I think isn't going to be as big of a factor as what it was intended to be, because every vulnerability is now a likely exploitable vulnerability. And then finally, the other term to be aware of is the known exploited vulnerability, or KEV. This term's actually been around quite a while. CISA has their binding operational directive around the KEV list, where if a vulnerability, and there are some ancient ones on the KEV list going back to the early 2000s and earlier, if that vulnerability exists on the KEV list, that means somewhere in the federal space, that vulnerability is known to be leveraged by attackers to try to attack the US federal government. So they've put that on the list, and they have accelerated timelines behind it. That exists in POAMs today. So this is nothing new here, but it does factor into the next function, which is calculating when VADR must be done. So the mitigation and resolution expectations is really built around taking pain, taking LEV, and taking IRV, putting them together and saying, if it's affecting more than one agency, debilitating to them, pain 5, it is an internet reachable and it has a LEV rating. Now, the expectation is that you're patching that, remediating it, mitigating it in 2 days. Historically, when looking at POAMs, that would have been a high, which was a 30-day. Taking that same example and saying it's a pain level 2, and it's a non-internet or likely exploitable vulnerability, that typically would have rated as a low. You would have had 180 days. Now you have 192 days. So you get an extra 12 days there. But the point here is that instead of just looking, was it a high, moderate, or low vulnerability, and going on a 30, 60, 90-day time frame, VADR says, look at, is it internet reachable? Is it likely exploitable? Is it likely to hit one agency, just a little bit, or lots of agencies, debilitating wise? Matrix those all together and accelerate patching. Then you couple that this was originally intended to go into effect in, I believe, June, July 2027, but with CISA's directive of start patching faster because of all the mythos and other AI related tools that are out there to exploit things. start patching faster. This is actually one of the messages I love the most about the program of, be ready, be more reactive to these vulnerabilities, be patching systems faster, because it's what's going to keep government data safe and organizations. Leah, thoughts?
No, you captured it really well. We wanted to sum up again what's happening. Tony made a great comment. I just want to expand upon the definition. Internet accessibility is not solely publicly accessible, but also includes if there is an indirect chain from the vulnerability to the intranet. So just an expansion of that definition. And when we send this out, be sure to click on those links. Links are going to take you to the full language so you can read those definitions fully as well.
Yeah.
We have a question that goes back to CMMC, but I kind of want to stay on this topic for a little bit, and then we'll go back to CMMC if that's okay with everyone, just to kind of stay on topic. Any other kind of questions or comments around what David has presented? Okay, so I'll let you sum up some of the other major changes.
Yeah, so in the CR26, they actually have a section labeled Other Major Changes. The first one to be aware of is FedRAMP is getting rid of all the templates that they've been publishing for years. And instead, they're providing guidelines on JSON schemas for providing machine-readable format items for that. That does not mean the templates have disappeared. They've simply been moved into an archive with disclaimers about make sure you're using the most up-to-date documentation available for that. Second, FedRAMP rules create the new set of items that must be verified and validated, i.e. the KSIs. Every single rule must be verified and validated during each independent assessment. And really what that means is historically with a FedRAMP assessment, there's been this rule that your initial assessment has been a full assessment. And then every year when you go through your annual, it's a selection of 1/3 of the overall controls is what it nets out to be. Plus any new controls that have been added, any SCR things that happen. So it always balloons to be a little bit more than 1/3, but now it's every year, it's a full assessment. And then finally, and I love this one because I, in my former life as a service provider, fell victim to this before. There are no ghost rules. And by that, I take that to mean, if you think back to revision 2, the boundary guidance, or revision 3 or revision 4 that never made it out of draft, but FedRAMP held you accountable to those, even though they were still a draft. Those days are gone per the website. And if it isn't in the CR26 website of the rules, it's not enforceable. If you can't point to it where it's in writing on fedramp.gov, it does not exist. And then an explicit statement to the service or to the 3POs, do not enforce ghost rules during the assessment. I thought that was very important to know because there's this legacy cruft out there, if you will, of memos, guidance, emails, etc., that were delivered over time that aren't being enforced any longer because they were not in the consolidated rule set.
Okay, great summary. And of course, from our perspective, we think about what does this mean for GovRAMP? What does this mean for those participating in our program? And so we really look at it kind of through two vantage points. One is the security impact. We really try to be security forward. So it's not just a compliance checklist. If you're participating in our program, you're doing things that are actually going to help improve your security and demonstrate that. And then harmonization for the ecosystem, right? We want to make sure that there is alignment because we recognize many providers serve the whole of government, from federal to state to local to education to tribal territories. And so we want to make sure that there is alignment where it makes sense to have alignment in the program. where we especially are starting, and you mentioned this, David, in kind of I'm sure many of you, I can tell you, we have had many conversations with our leadership, with our committees, with many of our members about, I'm going to call it the mythos effect, right? How do we prepare for the velocity of vulnerabilities that may be detected here in the near future? And how do we make sure that we're aligning that prioritization? And so where we're going to be starting, and this begins actually on Monday with our appeals committee, who's going to be really looking at how to prioritize vulnerabilities and maintain that security first mindset, right? And so we're going to look at the VADR, the VDR policies and rules that FedRAMP has published, that David just walked through, to think about how does this align with our program? What changes do we need to make, if any, to what we are doing to make sure that we're doing the right thing, not just for alignment, but for the community and for ultimately the public sector members that we're serving here collectively.
Yeah, but in particular, we wanted to acknowledge, for those of you that are in our fast track program that are coming from FedRAMP into GovRAMP, that our intent is not burden you down with doing POAMs and VADR, both
Right.
to satisfy both programs. We are aware of the VADR requirements. We are reading through them. We will adapt to those for those folks in the fast track program. And then we'll secondarily be evaluating, does that also make sense for us to do for GovRAMP native participants as
Yep.
well?
Yep.
So we see those as two separate steps. One, meet you where you are, and then two, do we take the rest of the program that direction?
Yep. The second piece here is that, and we've talked about this before, we've got the consolidated rules. We've had some conversations with 2 or 3 providers now who are interested in leveraging Fast Track, kind of the Fast Track program we've had from day one, for their 20X certification to come into GovRAMP. So we're going to be working with our committees as well on developing that framework for the pilot. What does that look like? How do we do it? And so we're very excited to begin that process. So hopefully at our next meeting, we'll have a lot of great progress to report back to you on how that works for us. The other piece, long term, and I think this came up as a question or a comment in the chat. Long term, we're going to be thinking about, and how does that work the other way? How can we make sure that the work you're doing for GovRAMP can be leveraged into that 20X program over time as well? So we'll be making our own balanced improvements, I guess, David, is how you could think of it, to make sure that we are adjusting to meet the market where the market is, but also to make sure, and this is really important, like GovRAMP is different. We are here to serve all the different levels of public sector. And so we've got to make sure that we're meeting public sector's needs as well in whatever we're doing, because state governments, much like the vendor community, have to meet many of those federal regs that flow down to them as well. So we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing from security, we're making compliance streamlined, and we'll have a lot more to report to you, I think, in the next few months on that initiative. Any other questions or comments related to this? And then Liz did have a question. We'll go back to CMMC. All right. So CMMC, David.
Yes.
This is a great question. I wanted to make sure. Here's your reminder for everyone. If you want to participate in our CMMC subgroup and get to see kind of the first draft of the narrative and the control alignment, email Chandler at govramp.org, and we'll make sure that we invite you. Like I said, that subgroup's going to be likely the last week of July or first week of August. So we're going to send out a couple times, see what works best. But Liz was asking a little bit more, when we're thinking about aligning with CMMC, is GovRAMP going to incorporate controls addressing CUI and FCI?
So as I was digging through the 171, both revision 2 and revision 3, and looking at the 853 language that GovRAMP is based on, it's very apparent, and I know Vicki is attending, so she can opine as well, that the 171 is scoped more for the FCI, CUI type data, where the 853 is more generalized. So I don't know that there's a need to specifically drill in on CUI or FCI for the core or the bigger GovRAMP program itself, because it treats all data the same in that regard. And if I've gotten that wrong, I hope Vicky will join in and correct me on there.
Yeah. Vicky's, feel free to unmute, Vicky. Join.
And she
Ooh, someone gave me ultimate power. No,
Yes.
David, you got the gist of it. I just wanted to clarify the design of 171 Rev 3 was intentional as a signal and direction that we are moving to a more consolidated set of requirements. There is no need to have two sets of requirements that kind of say similar things. And there's a lot of resources that support 853 that we did not create for 171. The scope of 171 was intentionally to focus on confidentiality of information in general. The application per statute in the federal space is for CUI. So any type of federal information that has specific safeguarding requirements per law, regulation, government-wide policy. So in that transition to Rev 3, as we get closer to 853, I do think this just means, easier translation between the frameworks, whether they be NIST, whether they be GovRAMP, whether they be FedRAMP, et cetera. So thank you.
Thank you, Vicky.
That's fantastic.
For those listening, if you're not familiar with Vicky, and you look at the 800, 171, and the 853, you're going to find her name on it. She is one of the authors in those documents, and a tremendous resource to GovRAMP. So thank you, Vicky.
Absolutely. We had a question from Patrick around, are we going to have a FedRAMP equivalency track or model? How are we going to keep track of all of this? Or are we going to merge it? I love that question because it allows us to talk a little bit about something that we probably quietly rolled out this year. And it's our federal overlay. And so the way that we have been approaching some of these different requirements, for example, is we have our baseline requirements for GovRAMP statuses. You know them, our on-ramp program for progressing snapshot program, and then our verified statuses of core, ready, and authorized. And then at authorized, you've got impact levels of low, moderate, and high, right? So that's kind of where we've got our baseline requirements if we just look at the control requirements. And then what we did a couple of years ago is we actually worked, we had a CJOS aligned task force. We had Chris Weatherly and his team participate as advisors, and we continue to meet on that. Thank you, David, for attending the CJOS summit last month. And so we continued to work on that. But with that, we rolled out an overlay, because what we found when we had our task force is that the FBI CJOS security policy 6.0 is what we align to right now, actually is pretty prescriptive on some of those parameter requirements. And so what we did was we overlaid those to our baseline for moderate impact level at the authorized level. And that allows providers or governments or anybody to go in and say, hey, how do I synthesize what the requirements are when I'm looking at GovRAMP and CJOS? And so our overlay is our effort at saying, here's how you do that, right? So if you needed to assess and demonstrate conformance to those CJOS security policy requirements, you can do that really easily by assessing at the moderate impact level baseline for GovRAMP and adding on that CJOS overlay. Well, we did the same thing recently with our federal overlay. So David, I don't know if you want to speak to that, and I can drop a link right in.
Right. No, that's exactly correctly. And what we did is we took a look at what the requirements in the Rev 5 program for FedRAMP was, and what the GovRAMP requirements were as well at each of the three impact levels, low, moderate, and high. And any place where there was a difference between what the GovRAMP requirement was, what the guidance for GovRAMP versus FedRAMP or other federal agencies were, or what the expectations and outcomes were, we noted that in the overlay. So the overlay will actually have multiple tabs in it, one for comparing our low against their low, one for moderate against moderate, and then finally high against high. Some notable differences between the two programs at the moderate impact level. SC13, the requirement within the federal space to utilize NIST validated cryptographic, let's see, CMVP, cryptographic module
Yeah.
verification program.
Well done. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. I always have to stop and pause for that one. But GovRAMP requires modern encryption usage. So an algorithm that has been vetted, not necessarily a library. In the federal space, the library itself needs to be vetted as well. So that is a difference, and we explicitly call that out in the overlay, because if you are coming from GovRAMP going into the federal space and you have not utilized FIPS validated 140-3 now encryption, that will be a delta that will be flagged and needs to be remediated to come out on the other side on the federal space. So we want to make sure that we have clear visibility into where those differences are between the programs, transparency around that, and then arming you with the information to respond accordingly.
Yep. So hopefully that answers your question. We'll keep going in this direction of overlays or addendums or kind of whatever makes the most sense. And sometimes you'll hear me say, although David, sometimes has a love-hate relationship with this phrase, but I say it's a choose your own adventure, right? Depending on what you need, that allows us to make, kind of the right risk decisions. And so if GovRAMP's baseline for core satisfies your needs, or ready or authorized at the moderate impact level, great. If you have regulated data that requires a little bit more, like CGIS, or you're trying to really align with some of those common federal requirements that we see at other agencies, think IRS, SSA, CMS, right? All kind of the like, then that federal overlay may be really helpful for you. And so as we work on the CMMC alignment, I anticipate we'll take a similar approach.
Yeah, but essentially our approach is to leverage the NIST framework the way it was intended.
That's right.
Around tailoring it to the need.
There you go. Jody, thank you. An overlay and task force. Yeah. We do have our AI security, thank you, task force ongoing as well. And we are watching for what NIST is doing there, Vicki. Thank you for all the work you and your entire team are doing as they are doing some work around AI overlays 853 as well. So with our AI task force, we are going to be rolling out a couple of things there around disclosure,
trustworthiness.
And then, a guidance for kind of facilitating that conversation for trustworthiness between partners. And so look for that to come out. Our next AI security task force is the end of August. We'll make sure everyone here has that information. If you'd like to participate, we're going to be walking through the guidance document then, probably send that out a little ahead of time, but really excited with kind of the direction that we're headed here. Okay, I want to make sure, I think we've covered most of the questions, and that's great because we are nearly at time. Just a couple of updates. Our registration is open. If you thought this was fun, which I hope you've really enjoyed the conversation we do, we appreciate the opportunity to connect with you. But we are having our annual conference. Our summit is November 15th through 17th. In San Antonio, Texas. We are very excited to be down in Texas this year. It's Sunday through Tuesday. We'll end around 11 a.m. I think on Tuesday and roll right into Billington's Critical Infrastructure Summit. So looking forward to being able to kind of coordinate with them again and really bring a lot of value to the community. We hope you can join us. The link is here. Chandler dropped it in the chat as well. Thank you so much. But this is just an incredible time to bring this community together and really talk about how to work best together and lessons learned, and also have some fun. I think we have a good time at this meeting. So lots of good things coming up. Anything else to add, David?
I always walk away from these conversations at GovRAMP Cyber Summit smarter. It's a great opportunity to interact with others with different procurement folks within the ecosystem, state CISOs, ISOs, and other service providers as well.
That's right. Well, we have reached our time. If you have questions, ideas, tell us the good, bad, and the ugly. Otherwise, we do want to hear from you. Our emails are here. They're easy. Leah@govramp.org, David@govramp.org. But truly, thank you for your time and your feedback here. Like I said, we will be meeting with the CMMC subgroup later this month or early August. If you'd like to participate, reach out. And we'll have I think a lot more to report here in the next few months. We are planning for our next working group to be October 9th. That's Friday, October 9th at 11 a.m. Eastern. We'll send that information out in our follow-up email so you have that and can mark your calendars as well. Anything else for the good of the cause?
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Thanks all.
Thank you.